Hey, what's going on, everyone? Hope you're all doing great today. So, Capcom just pushed out a brand new patch for Monster Hunter Wilds. And yeah, it's one of those updates that might look small on paper, but it's actually a really important one, especially if you've been running into some weird crashes or you've been farming those high star quests nonstop. The update is officially version 1.0302, and I want to go over everything that's changed, what it means for your gameplay, and why this little hotfix actually matters a lot more than it might seem at first glance. So, first things first, let's talk about what this update actually does. You know how in Monster Hunter Wilds, the Palico customization and gear options are one of the best parts of the game. Like, you can really make your companion look however you want. But apparently, a bunch of players started experiencing a really annoying crash that would happen when they were viewing certain Palico equipment while having ambient occlusion turned off in their settings. Basically, the game was struggling to render some visual effects correctly when that particular graphics setting was disabled, and it caused a full-on crash for some setups. And if you've been hunting for a while, you know that kind of crash can be brutal, especially if it happens right after a long quest or while trying to show off your Palico gear to your friends online. Capcom confirmed that this was one of the top priorities they wanted to fix, and that's exactly what this update tackles first. Now, if you're someone who tweaks the game's graphics to get smoother performance, like turning off ambient occlusion to boost your frame rate a little, this should make things much more stable. So that's one major headache gone, which is nice because it's the kind of thing that doesn't sound huge in the patch notes, but it really affects how smoothly your sessions go. The other main part of this update is about the quest system, specifically the two target 9-star quests. If you've been grinding endgame hunts, you probably noticed that the game wasn't giving out as many of those double monster missions as often as before. A bunch of players were pointing out that after the previous patch, the rate of those quests showing up seemed to drop off, making it harder to farm for certain materials or just to mix up the variety of hunts you were getting. Capcom listened to that feedback and adjusted the system again so that the two target quests appear more frequently now. They even mentioned that the overall appearance rate is at least equal to what it used to be before version 1.21, with a bit of natural variance so it doesn't feel predictable. This is actually a pretty good move because the balance of quest generation is something Monster Hunter fans take seriously. Those double monster hunts tend to be more rewarding, more chaotic, and definitely more exciting when you're looking for rare drops. It's not just about the materials either. It's about that feeling of efficiency when you can take on two creatures in one go and push your loadouts to their limits. So, if you felt like the game had slowed down your farming rhythm after the last patch, this should bring back that old flow. Another small but meaningful thing this patch cleaned up involves certain quest generation issues. Apparently, there were reports that some combinations of monsters just weren't appearing the way they should in specific conditions. For example, players noticed that certain pairings, like Logicrus showing up with Uthduna in the Scarlet Forest during the Plenty season, weren't generating properly, which messed up the ecosystem feel and made some quest pools too narrow. Capcom quietly fixed that too, making sure the seasonal and regional monster mix feels more natural again. It's one of those under-the-hood tweaks that might not jump out at you immediately, but once you start running more hunts, you'll probably notice that the quest variety feels richer again. Now, you might be wondering why this update is required for online play when it doesn't seem like a massive content drop. The simple reason is that even small hotfixes like this one can affect how quest data syncs across multiplayer sessions. So, if you haven't updated yet, you won't be able to connect online or join multiplayer lobbies until your version matches everyone else's. That's why Capcom marked it as mandatory for all platforms: PlayStation 5, Xbox Series XS, and Steam. And just in case you're checking, you can confirm you're on the latest version by looking at the bottom right of the title screen where it shows 1.030.02.00. I actually think this approach from Capcom shows they're paying attention not just to the big flashy updates, but also to the smaller stuff that can quietly mess with player experience. The company's been really quick with these maintenance patches lately, and that's something fans are appreciating because Monster Hunter Wilds is still in that stage where it's growing and balancing itself after launch. Each small update helps fine-tune things so that by the time we hit the next major content update, probably the one that adds new monsters or an event festival, the foundation feels rock solid. Speaking of foundation, let's talk about the quest frequency fix again for a second. What makes it interesting is that it tells us something about how Capcom is tracking player engagement data. They must have noticed a dip in how many players were completing certain endgame hunts after the last update, which usually signals that something's off in the random quest distribution. When they adjusted that, they probably looked at player progression rates, material drop tracking, and even matchmaking times for those high-star hunts. So this wasn't just a quick tweak. They likely used actual gameplay data to find the right balance, which is pretty cool. And if you think about it, this is exactly what you want from a live service model like Monster Hunter Wilds. The game is built around an ecosystem that's supposed to feel alive, but if the quest pool gets stale or the rewards stop matching your effort, players drift away fast. With this fix, Capcom's making sure that the pace of endgame grinding stays fun and varied, not repetitive or empty. You'll probably start noticing a few more interesting two-target matchups popping up in your quest board over the next few days, so it's worth checking after you update. Now, a lot of people were asking whether this patch secretly adds any new content or balance changes for weapons, and the answer is no, at least not this time. This is strictly a maintenance and stability update. But the timing of it is interesting because it dropped just as the community started speculating about the next big title update. Capcom has a pattern of dropping small fixes like this right before they start teasing something major. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing a teaser trailer or dev post in the next few weeks, hinting at a new event or monster. They usually fix stability first, so everything runs smooth when new content drops. If you're on PC, you might notice the update's pretty small in size, just a few hundred megabytes. But even though it's light, definitely don't skip it. Sometimes players delay small hotfixes thinking they can play offline without updating, but because this one includes stability improvements tied to visual rendering, you'll want it even for single player. Plus, nobody likes dealing with those random crashes that come out of nowhere, especially if you're in the middle of capturing a monster or carving after a long fight. The cool part is that the community response so far has been really positive. Players are saying they're glad Capcom addressed the Palico crash so fast because that issue popped up all over Reddit and Steam discussions earlier this month. There were entire threads of people swapping workarounds, like enabling ambient occlusion just to avoid crashes, even if it tanked their frame rates. It's nice to see that kind of feedback loop where the developers actually fix it instead of leaving it hanging for weeks. So, if you're booting the game up after this patch, you might not immediately notice flashy new features or monsters, but you will feel a smoother, more stable experience overall. Those subtle improvements, like the quest pool being more balanced and the graphics settings no longer causing issues, make a huge difference during longer play sessions. And that's really what Capcom seems to be focusing on right now. Quality of life polish while preparing for the next wave of content. Something else that's worth mentioning is that this update reminds us how Monster Hunter Wilds handles its performance optimizations differently across platforms. The ambient occlusion crash seemed to affect PC players the most, but some console users experienced frame dips or visual bugs too when toggling certain options. With this patch, the rendering pipeline for the Palico gear should now be unified across platforms, which might even give you a subtle boost in visual stability. It's not going to change your FPS dramatically, but it'll stop those random micro stutters that happen when loading layered gear textures. So what's next? Based on Capcom's recent pattern, we might be heading toward another bigger patch in the next few weeks. Maybe something that adds new event quests or seasonal content. If they're following the pattern from Iceborne and Rise, we'll probably get a roadmap update soon that teases what's coming before the end of the year.